In this video we want to talk about the classifications of economic theory. Well, economics is divided essentially into two parts. Into microeconomics, this studies economic activities of individual economic agents. So microeconomics is concerned with the consumer, individual markets or individual firms. So it's individuals that are important in microeconomics. Individual markets, individual products, individual consumers. So it's to do with the individual. That's important. It's concerned with individual markets, as I said, consumers, firms, industries and related topics, but all individual. So it's looking at singular entities. Macroeconomics is the second big division. Now, this is concerned with the study of aggregates, the study of totalities. It's when we combine economic data into aggregates. This is when we get macroeconomics. So, if we look at some of the topics that are covered in macroeconomics, it's quite an extensive list, but let's have a look at some. For example, aggregate investment. It's not looking at the investment within one company. That's microeconomics. It's looking at aggregate investment, investment in all the companies in the country. So that's aggregate investment. It's looking at the balance of payments, not the import or export of a particular commodity or product. It's looking at all the imports added up, all taken together. It's the aggregate of them. It's the aggregate of all the exports. And it's one subtracted from the other, giving us the balance of payments. It looks at the rate of inflation, not prices rising in one particular market or for one particular good. That's microeconomics. That's simply the forces of supply and demand in one market causing the prices to move. Inflation is looking at all prices. It's looking at an index of all prices in the country. And the rate of inflation is when all the prices are increasing. They could be falling, in which case it's the rate of deflation. So again, aggregate concepts. Unemployment is another one. That's macroeconomics as well, because it looks at all unemployment in the country. Not just the unemployment of one particular individual in the country. It's looking at all the unemployment in the country and how it's measured and what it means and policies relating to it. So that's what we mean by macroeconomics. It's looking at the growth rate in the country and the possible decline of the country. Countries sometimes go into recession and have, if you like, negative growth, which is the same as decline. But looking at economic growth in the country means the whole country is growing. The economy of the whole country is growing. It's not just one company that's getting stronger and growing. It's all the country. There's more industry, more commerce, more companies, more trading. The country in total is growing. That's a macroeconomic concept. As is consumption expenditure. It's not my individual expenditure. That's microeconomics. Macroeconomics is when we add all of our expenditures together as individuals, we add them all together and we get this macro figure, which is the consumption expenditure in the country. And the rate of interest applies to all money transactions. It's a macro concept. The money supply and demand. And the price of money is just the rate of interest. The money supply and demand is the whole quantity of money in the country and the demand for money in the country. Again, looking at macroeconomic concepts. And government expenditure and taxation, which is sometimes known as fiscal policy. And fiscal policy is a macroeconomic topic. It looks at all government expenditure, all across the various departments of government, from defence, health, education, law and order, all of the government expenditures, and all of the taxation it receives from companies and from individuals, from employment, from expenditure on goods and services, and so on. So it's a macro concept. So now we have this big distinction between microeconomics and macroeconomics. Microeconomics deals with individual markets, individual products, individual consumers. Macroeconomics looks at all of them. We also have an issue in economics looking at welfare, looking at the well-being of the population or of individuals in the country. And the outcome of economic activity is welfare. That's the whole purpose of the economic system, is to produce welfare for the population, to produce well-being for the population. Now, when economic policy, when the government changes something, when economic policy changes, some groups benefit and others may suffer. For example, let's say the government decides to help some section of the population. It decides to help people, helps them to buy homes, to buy houses. So it gives them a grant towards the buying of a house. Let's pretend. Well, where does the government get the money to give to the people to buy the house? Well, it has to tax that money away from another group. So one group benefit and the other group suffer. Now you could say, well, the other group are probably very rich, but the money is still being taken away by force. They may not want to give that money away. It's their money. Now they have to give it away, or it's taken away by the government. They have no choice in the matter, perhaps. So one group benefit and the other group suffer. And that's often the case with economic policy, that you find some group within society will benefit, other groups may suffer. Industry might benefit from some policy, consumers may lose out. Consumers might benefit and industry loses out. So, generally speaking, you'll find somebody loses when somebody wins. A famous Italian economist back in the 1930s, Alfredo Pareto, who became popular for one principle in which we can judge welfare changes. This is called the Pareto improvement. This means that if you can make one group better off without damaging another group, without hurting another group or another individual, that's called a Pareto improvement. So the government is constantly looking for policies in which some people will win and yet no one will lose. Now that would be a Pareto improvement. It could happen in times of economic growth, that the benefits from economic growth go to some particular section of the population, and the section who don't benefit, at least they don't lose. So that could be a Pareto improvement. So one section benefits and the others don't lose out. They don't have to pay for it. And related to this concept is this idea that Pareto efficiency is said to exist when a policy change can increase the welfare of one person without decreasing the welfare of someone else. So that's what I meant by a Pareto improvement. It means that when a policy change, the government changes some policy, some rule, it can increase the welfare of at least one person is better off, but yet no one is made worse off. That's a Pareto improvement. It doesn't have to be a whole group, just one person being made better off and no one made worse off. That's a Pareto improvement. But related to this is this concept of Pareto Optimality. This exists when no one can be made better off without making someone worse off. Whenever a situation exists that in order to make someone better off, someone else has got to be made worse off, if that is the situation, this is called Pareto Optimality. In other words, any adjustment, any policy by the government is going to make someone worse off. Any change in policy is going to make someone worse off. If that exists in the current state, is Pareto optimal. No one can be made better off without hurting someone else. If that's the case, that is called Pareto Optimality. So in this short video, what we've looked at is the two key areas of economic study, microeconomics and macroeconomics. We've also looked at this idea of welfare, and we've looked at the idea of Pareto improvements and Pareto optimality. And that's all we're going to deal with in this video, so we're going to leave it at that and say thank you for watching.